Henderson the Rain King by Bellow.
What made me take this trip to Africa? There is no quick explanation. Things got worse and worse and worse, and pretty soon they were too complicated. When I think of my condition at the age of 55, when I bought the ticket, all is grief. The facts begin to crowd me, and soon I get a pressure in the chest. A disorderly rush begins. My parents, my wives, my girls, my children, my farm, my habits, my money, my drunkenness, my prejudices, my brutality, my face, my soul. I might as well start with the money. I am rich. From my old man, I inherited $3 million after taxes. But I thought myself a bum, and had my reasons. The main reason being that I behave like a bum. But privately, when things got very bad, I often looked into books to see whether I could find some helpful words. And one day I read, "The forgiveness of sins is perpetual, and righteousness first is not required." This impressed me so much that I went around saying it to myself. But then I forgot which book it was in. At birth, I weighed 14 pounds, and it was a tough delivery. Then I grew up, 6 foot 4 inches tall, 230 pounds, an enormous head, rugged, with hair like Persian lamb's fur, suspicious eyes, usually narrowed, blustering ways, a great nose. I was one of 3 children, and the only survivor. It took all my father's charity to forgive me, and I don't think he ever made it altogether. When it came time to marry, I tried to please him, and chose a girl of our own social class. Her name was Frances. To go by the ages of the kids, we were married about 20 years. Christ, I've got plenty of children. God bless the whole bunch of them. With Frances, the case was hopeless. One morning in the kitchen, we had a conversation that set us apart for good and all. Just a few words. They went like this. "And what would you like to do now?" I was then losing interest in the farm. "I wonder," I said, "if it's too late for me to become a doctor, if I could enter medical school." Frances opened her mouth, usually so sober, not to say dismal and straight, and laughed at me. Okay, I said. Soon after I came back from the war, I was too old for combat duty, but nothing could keep me from it. I went down to Washington and pressured people until I was allowed to join the fight. Frances and I were divorced. I was delighted with the divorce. It offered me a new start in life. I had a new wife already picked out, and we were soon married. My second wife is called Lily. We have twin boys. I gave Lily a terrible time, worse than Frances. I raved at her in public and swore at her in private. I got into brawls in the country saloons near my farm, and the troopers locked me up. I offered to take them all on, and they would have worked me over if I hadn't been so prominent in the county. Lily came and bailed me out. Then I had a fight with a vet over one of my pigs, and another with the driver of a snowplow on US 7 when he tried to force me off the road. Then about 2 years ago, I broke my leg. For months, I was on crutches, hitting everyone who crossed my path, man or beast, giving Lily hell. You see, all the time, there was this disturbance in my heart, a voice that spoke there and said, I want. And I would ask, what do you want? But this was all it would ever tell me. It never said a thing except, I want. I guess I hadn't taken 2 steps out into the world as a small boy when there was Charlie Albert, a person in several ways like myself. In age, he's only a year my junior, and in wealth he goes me a little better, for when his old mother dies, he will have another fortune. It was with Charlie that I took off for Africa, hoping to find a remedy for my situation. The heat was just what I craved, much hotter than the Gulf of Mexico, and then the colors themselves did me a world of good. I didn't feel the pressure in the chest, nor hear any voice within. After about 3 weeks, however, my discontent returned, and one afternoon I heard the old familiar voice within. It began to say, "I want, I want, I want." I said to Charlie, "I don't want you to get sore now, but I don't think this is working out." "Well, if you want to shove off, I won't try to stop you, Gene." And that is what I did. I hired 2 of Charlie's natives, and when we drove away in the Jeep, I felt better at once. After a few days, I laid off one of them and had a long conversation with the other. His name was Ramaleo. We arrived at an understanding. He said that if I wanted to see some places off the beaten track, he could guide me to them. Knowing how attached he was to the Jeep, I told him I would give it to him, if he would take me far enough. He said the place he was going to guide me to was so remote we could reach it only on foot. So I said, "Let's walk." When we reached Talusi, we left the machine in dead storage in a grass hut. From here, we took a plane to Bavente. It was an exceptional flight, and ended on a field of hard clay beyond the mountain. We were to travel another week on foot. Geographically speaking, I didn't have the remotest idea where we were, and I didn't care too much. I had a great trust in Ramaleo. So for days and days, he led me through villages, over mountain trails, and then to deserts far and far out. He himself couldn't tell me much about our destination in his limited English. He said only that we were going to see a tribe he called the Arniwi. A long time ago, before he was fully grown, Ramaleo had visited the Arniwi, together with his father or his uncle. He told me many times, but I couldn't make out which. Ramaleo was in his late 30s, he told me, but looked much older because of premature wrinkles. He had a bush of dusty hair, which he tried sometimes, but vainly to smooth flat. Old tribal scars were cut into his cheeks, and his ears had been mutilated to look like hackles so that the points stuck into his hair. He had been born a pagan, but somehow along the way he had been converted, and now he said his prayers every evening. Finally, one morning we found ourselves in the bed of a good-sized river, the Arniwi, and we walked downstream in it, for it was dry. The mud had turned to clay, and the boulders sat like lumps of gold in the dusty glitter. Then we sighted the Arniwi village and saw the circular roofs that rose to a point. From these coverings, smoke went up into the silent radiance. The Arniwi were cattle raisers. We startled some of the skinny animals on the banks, and they began to buck and gallop, and soon we found ourselves amid a band of African kids, naked boys and girls, yelling at the sight of us. Then we were met by a party of naked adults. In front of them was a young woman, a girl not much older than my daughter Ricey. As soon as she saw me, she burst into loud tears. Behind her, the other natives were crying along softly. I said to Ramaleo, "What the hell is going on?" "Him shame," said Ramaleo, very grave, with that upstanding bush of hair. He sensed that I was rattled by this tearful delegation and added, No, sir. You no be blame." "Well, Ramaleo," I said, "I'm not getting anywhere, and our presence is very hard on them, that's for sure." "Them cry for dead cow," he said. And he explained the thing very clearly, that they were mourning for cattle that had died in the drought, and that it took responsibility for the drought upon themselves. The gods were offended, or something like that. A curse was mentioned. Anyway, as we were strangers, they were obliged to come forward and confess everything to us, and ask whether we knew the reason for their trouble. "How should I know, except the drought? A drought is a drought," I said. But my heart goes out to them. And I began to say, almost to shout, okay, all right, ladies, all right, you guys, break it up. That's enough, please, I get it." And this did have some effect on them, as I suppose they heard in the tone of my voice that I felt a certain amount of distress also, and I said to Ramaleo, "So ask them what they want me to do. I intend to do something, and I really mean it." "What do you do, sir?" Never mind. There must be something that only I can do. Start asking. So he spoke to them, and the weeping died down. Then a man came up and talked to me in English, which astonished me. He said, "I am Itello. I am here to introduce, welcome, and how do you do?" "What? What?" I said. "Itello," he said. He took my hand and placed it flat against his breast, saying, "Itello." I did likewise, saying, "Henderson, how do you do? Say, what's going on around here? Everybody crying to beat the band? My man says it's because of the cows. This isn't a good time for a visit, huh? Maybe I should go." "No, you be guests," said Itello, and made me welcome. "Well," I said, "I see you have been out in the world anyway. Or is English everybody's second language here?" "Sir," he said, "oh no, just only me." Perhaps because of the breadth of his nose, he had a tone which was ever so slightly nasal. "Malindi School. I went, and also my late brother. A lot of young fellows sent all over to Malindi School. After that, Beirut School. I have traveled all over. So I alone speak, and for miles and miles around, nobody else, but only Wariri King Dafu." I said, "Do you happen to be royalty yourself?" "Queen is my auntie," he said. "Ulatali, and you will stay with other auntie, Matelba, sir. She lend you her house." "Ah, that's great," I said. "That's hospitable. And so you're a prince?" "Oh, yes." Owing to his size and appearance, I thought from the beginning that he must be distinguished. By now a pair of umbrellas had come up, carried by two women. The sun was very rich, and I was sweating, and these two state umbrellas, about 8 feet tall and shaped like squash flowers, gave very little shade from such a height. So we went along by twos with considerable ceremony, Itello leading towards the Queen's compound. And now I began to understand what the trouble here was all about. The cause of all the tears. A man about 50, white-haired, was kneeling, weeping and shuddering, throwing dust on his head because his cow was passing away. All watched with grief while the fellow took her by the horns, begging her not to leave him. But she was already in a state of indifference, and the skin over her eyes wrinkled as if he were only just keeping her awake. At this, I myself was swayed. I felt compassion, and I said, "Prince, for Christ's sake, can't anything be done?" "I do not think," said Itello. Just then the least expected of things happened, which was that I caught a glimpse of water in considerable amounts. I smelled it too, and I stopped the prince and I said to him, "Check me out on this, will you, Prince? Here is this guy killing himself with lamentation because his cow is dying of thirst, and if I am not mistaken, I actually see some water shining over there to the left. Is that a fact?" He admitted that it was water. "Can I have a look at it?" With a certain reluctance, he said, "Okay, I suppose." Itello and I left the other villagers behind and went to see the water. A thick wall of dark green stone retained it, half cistern and half dam. I figured that there must be a spring underneath. A dry watercourse coming from the mountains showed what the main source of supply was normally. To prevent evaporation, a big roof of thatch was pitched over the cistern, measuring at least 50 by 70 feet. I stared into the water and realized that there was considerable activity just below the surface. Through the webbing of the light, I first saw pollywogs with huge heads at all stages of development, with full tails like giant sperm and with budding feet, and then great powerful frogs, spotted, swimming by with their neckless thick heads and long white legs. "So don't tell me. It's the frogs," I said to Itello. "They keep you from watering the cattle." Yes, it was the frogs. "How did they ever get in here? Where do they come from? These questions Itello couldn't answer. All he could tell me was that these creatures, never before seen, had appeared in the cistern about a month ago and prevented the cattle from being watered. This was the curse mentioned before. "You call this a curse?" I said. "But you've been out in the world. Didn't they show you a frog at school? They're harmless." "Oh, yes, sure," said the prince. "So you know you don't have to let your animals die because of a few of these beasts in the water." But about this he could say nothing. He put up his large hands and said, "Must be no animal in drink water." "Then why don't you get rid of them?" "Oh, no. Never touch animal in drink water." "Oh, come on, Prince. Pish-posh," I said. "We could filter them out. We could poison them. There are 100 things we could do." The gnats were spinning over the sun-warmed cistern, which was green and yellow and dark by turns. I said to Itello, "You're not allowed to molest these animals. But what if a stranger came along, me for instance, and took them on for you?" I realized that I would never rest until I had dealt with these creatures and lifted the plague. From his attitude, I could tell that under some unwritten law he was not allowed to encourage me in my purpose, but that he and all the rest of the Arniwi would consider me their very greatest benefactor. I gave him a deep look and I said, "Itello, you leave this to me," and drew in a sharp breath between my teeth, feeling that I had it in me to be the doom of these frogs. We went towards Itello's hut, for I wanted to clean up a little bit before my introduction to the Queen. It was within a courtyard, and like the rest of the houses, round, made of clay, and with a conical roof. Here I sat down, and Itello sat opposite me, while Ramaleu began to unpack. The prince wanted to talk. "I go to school in Malindi," he said. "Wonderful, beautiful town." He spoke of his wanderings. He and his friend Dafu, who is now king of the Wariri, had traveled together, taking off from the south. They shipped on the Red Sea in some old tubs and worked on the railroad built by the Turks to the Al-Madinah before the Great War. Both had attended a missionary school in Syria, and both had eventually returned to their remote homes. "Well," I said, "I guess it was great for you to go and find out what things are like." Queen Relatali and her sister Metalba were waiting for us under a thatched shed in the Queen's courtyard. The Queen was seated on a bench made of poles with a red blanket displayed flagwise behind her, and as we came forward, Ramaleu, with a bag of presents on his back, the old lady opened her lips and smiled at me. Itello indicated that I should give the old woman a hand, and as I was astonished when she took it and buried it between her breasts. This is the normal form of greeting here. Itello had put my hand against his breast, but from a woman I didn't anticipate the same. On top of everything else, I mean the radiant heat and the monumental weight which my hand received, there was the calm pulsation of her heart participating in the introduction. This was as regular as the rotation of the earth, but it was a surprise to me. But I couldn't keep my hand there forever, and I came to myself and drew it out. Then I returned the courtesy. I held her hand on my chest and said, "Me, Henderson. Henderson." The whole court applauded to see how fast I caught on. I expressed regret at the trouble they were having, the drought and the cattle and the frogs, and I said I sympathized. This was translated by Itello, and I think it was well received by the old lady. But when I spoke of troubles, she smiled right along, as steady as the moonlight at the bottom of a stream. I then told Ramaleu to start with the presents. First of all, he brought out a plastic raincoat in a plastic envelope. I scowled at him, ashamed to offer this cheap stuff to the old Queen. I said to Itello, "Prince, please forgive this shabby present. I hate like hell to bring a raincoat during a drought. It's like a mockery, if you know what I mean." However, he said the present gave her happiness, and it evidently did. To the prince I gave a small compass with binoculars attached. Not much good, even for bird watchers. For the Queen's fat sister Metalba, noticing that she smoked, I brought out one of those Austrian lighters with a long white trailing wick. By the dozen they came to about 14 cents apiece. You can't beat that for a bargain. In some places, especially in the bust. Metalba was so heavy that her skin had turned pink from the expansion. Her hands were dyed with henna and her hair stood up stiffly with indigo. At the hips she was as broad as a sofa, and she too took my hand and placed it on her breast, saying, Metalba, Metalba ahuantu. I am Metalba. Metalba admires you. I admire her too, I told the prince. I tried to get him to explain to the queen that the coat which she now had on was waterproof. As he seemed unable to find a word for waterproof, I took hold of the sleeve and licked it. Misinterpreting this, she caught hold of me and licked me back. She licked me on the ear and on the bristled cheek and then pressed my head towards her middle. All right, now, what's this? I said, and Ramaleo nodded his bush of hair, saying, Okay, sa, okay. In short, this was a special mark of the old lady's favor. Italo protruded his lips to show that I was expected to kiss her on the belly. The lion's skin she was wearing was pushed aside by my face, and I kissed, giving a shiver at the heat I encountered. I was aware of the old lady's navel and her internal organs as they made sounds of submergence. When I drew back from this significant experience, having made contact with a certain power, unmistakable, which emanated from the woman's middle, Metalba also reached for my head, but I pretended I didn't understand and said to Italo, How come when everybody else is in mourning your aunts are both so happy? He said, 2 women of Bitanas. He began to explain. A Bita was a person of real substance. You couldn't be any higher or better. A Bita was not only a woman, but a man at the same time. As the elder, Willatali had seniority in Bitanas too. Some of these people in the courtyard were her husbands, and others were her wives. She had plenty of both. The wives called her husband, and the children called her both father and mother. She had risen above ordinary human limitations and did whatever she liked because of her proven superiority in all departments. Both my aunts like you. It is very good for you, Henderson, said Italo. The queen wanted to know who I was and where I came from. As soon as I heard the question, a shadow fell on the occasion and I began to suffer. I wish I could explain why it oppressed me to tell about myself, but so it was. And I didn't know what to say. Who was I? A millionaire wanderer and wayfarer, a brutal and violent man driven into the world, a man who fled his own country, settled by his forefathers, a fellow whose heart said, I want. What could I tell this old woman in a lion's skin? That I had ruined the original piece of goods issued to me and was traveling to find a remedy? Or that I had read somewhere that the forgiveness of sin was perpetual, but with typical carelessness had lost the book? She saw that, in spite of my capable appearance and rude looks, I was standing oppressed and dumb, and she changed the subject. I thought myself very lucky. This was a beautiful, strange, special place, and I was moved by it. I believe the queen could straighten me out if she wanted to, as if any minute now she might open her hand and show me the thing, the source, the germ, the cipher, the mystery, you know. I was absolutely convinced she must have it. Look how happy she was, grinning with her flat nose and gap teeth, and look at her white head. It comforted me just to see her, and I felt that I might learn to be sustained, too, if I followed her example. Altogether, I felt my hour of liberation was drawing near when the sleep of the spirit was liable to burst. I said to Prince Italo, Look, Your Highness, could you arrange it for me to have a real talk with the Queen? You don't talk, he said, somewhat surprised. You do talk, Mr. Henderson. Oh, real talk, I mean. Not sociable fiddle-faddle. In earnest, I said, about the wisdom of life. because I know she's got it, and I wouldn't leave without a sample of it. I'd be crazy to. All right, he said. So you know what I mean. I said, this is great. This is wonderful. I'll be grateful till my dying day, Prince. You have no idea how this fills my cup. Meanwhile, Metalba was holding my hand, and I said, what does she want? Oh, she have a strong affection for you. You have won her heart. Hell with her heart, I said. Then I began to think how to open a discussion with Willatali. What should I concentrate on? Marriage and happiness? Duty? Health? Death? The voice that said, I want. How could I explain this to her and to Itello? I had to find the simplest, most essential points, and all my thinking happens to be complicated. I said to Itello, now please, tell the Queen for me, friend, that it does wonderful things for me simply to see her. I don't know whether it's her general appearance or the lion's skin or what I feel emanating from her. Anyway, it puts my soul at rest. This was transmitted by Itello, and then the Queen leaned forward, smiling, and spoke. My aunt says, what do you request, sir? Oh, does she? Well, that's wonderful. For a starter, ask her what she sees in me, since I find it so hard to tell her who I am. Itello delivered the question, and Willatali furrowed up her brow in that flexible way peculiar to the Arniwi. She spoke slowly. Itello transmitted her words. You have, sir, a strong personality. Your mind is full of thought. Possess some of fundamental bitterness also. You love sensations. I nodded. And Willatali proceeded. Says you are very sore, oh, sir, Mr. Henderson. Your heart is barking. That's correct, I said, with all three heads like Cerberus the watchdog. But why is it barking? He, however, was listening to the Queen. Frenzy, he said. Yes, I'll confirm that, I said. The woman has a real gift. And I encouraged her. Tell me, Queen Willatali, I want the truth. I don't want you to spare me. Suffer, said Itello, and Metalba picked up my hand in sympathy. Yes, I certainly do. She say now, Mr. Henderson, that you have a great capacity, indicated by your largeness and especially your nose. The women of bitterness began to speak again, slowly, dwelling on my appearance with her dreamy look. What does she say? What does she say? She say she wish you tell her, sir, why you come. She know you have to come across mountain and walk a very long time. You not young, Mr. Henderson. I sighed and said, please tell the Queen that I did it for my health. Itello gave a startled laugh. I know, I said, superficially, I don't look sick, but that's how it is. Oh, it's miserable to be human. You get such queer diseases just because you're human and for no other reason. Before you know it, as the years go by, you're just like other people you've seen, with all those peculiar human ailments. Just another vehicle for temper and vanity and rashness and all the rest. Itello hesitated, then transmitted as much of this as he could to the Queen. She nodded. Her hair floated like a million spider lines, while the fat of her arms hung down over her elbows. Gruntu Molani, the old Queen said. What's that? What does she say? Say you want to live. Gruntu Molani, men want to live. Yes. Molani, me Molani, she sees that? God will reward her. Tell her for saying it to me. I'll reward her myself. I'll annihilate those frogs clear out of that cistern. They'll wish they had never come down from the mountains to bother you. Not only I, Molani, for myself, but for everybody. I could not bear how sad things had become in the world, and so I set out because of this Malani, Gruntu Malani, everybody. I raised my helmet to all the family and members of the court. Gruntu Malani! God does not shoot dice with our souls, and therefore Gruntu Malani. Atello left us at our hut, and Ramaleo and I had our supper, which consisted mainly of cold yams and hardtack, to which I added a supplement of vitamin pills. On top of this, I had a slug of whiskey, and then I said, "Come on, Ramaleo. We'll go over to that cistern and case it by moonlight." I took along a flashlight to use under the thatch. These frogs really had it better than anyone else. Here, due to the moisture, grew the only weeds in the village, and this odd variety of mountain frog, mottled, green and white, was hopping, splashing, and swimming. I swung the flashlight to and fro over the water in which they were massed. Poor little bastards, was what I said. But in actual fact, I was gloating. Yuck, yuck, yuck. My heart was already fattening in anticipation of their death. We hate death. We fear death. But when you get right down to cases, there's nothing like it. I was sorry for the cows, yes. And on the humane side, I was fine. I checked out 100%. But still I hungered to let fall the ultimate violence on these creatures in the cistern. I considered various alternatives, like dredging or poisons, and none of them seemed advisable. I told Ramaleo, "The only method that figures is a bomb. One blast will kill all these little buggers, and when they're floating dead on top, all we have to do is skim them off. In the Arniwi can water the cattle again. It's simple." When my idea did get across to him at last, he said, "Oh, no, no, sir." "What do you mean, oh, no, no, sir? Don't be a jerk. I'm an old soldier, and I know what I'm talking about." But it was no use arguing with him. The idea of an explosion frightened him, and I said, "Okay, Ramaleo, let's go to our shack then and get some sleep. We've got lots to do tomorrow." So we went back to the hut, and he began to say his prayers. I lay down on my blanket in the dark, out of range of the moonbeams. I kept thinking of the best way to blow up those frogs. Naturally, I know a little something about explosives, and I thought I could take the 2 batteries out of my flashlight and manufacture a pretty good bomb by filling it with powder from the shells of my .375 H&H Magnum. They carry quite a charge, believe me, and could be used on an elephant. I had bought the .375 especially for this trip to Africa after reading about it in Life or Look. I lay grinning at the surprise those frogs had coming, and also somewhat at myself, because I was anticipating the gratitude of Willatali and Metalba and Atello and all the people. While I was lying awake, I had a visit from Metalba. Coming in, she shut off the moonlight in the doorway and then sat down near me on the floor. Sighing, she took my hand and made me touch her skin, which was certainly wonderfully soft, and she had a right to be vain of it. Though I felt it, I acted oblivious and refused to respond. My bulk lay extended on the blanket, and I fixed my gaze on the thatch. As Metalba continued to sigh and caress and smooch me and lead my fingertips over her skin and between her lips, I realized she had come for a purpose, this mountainous woman with indigo hair. And I lifted my arm and let it fall on Ramaleu's face. He opened his eyes. "Ramaleu, what you want, sir?" he said. Sit up. We have a visitor." He was unsurprised by this, and he rose. "Find out what is the purpose of this visit." So he began to talk to her. From this conversation, the fact came out that she wanted me to buy her, and realizing that I didn't have the bride price, she had brought it to me tonight. Got to pay, sir, for woman's. That I know, pal. All the stuff she had brought was lying outside, and she wanted me to see it. And so I rose, highly unwilling, and we went out of the hut. She had come with an escort, and when they saw me in the moonlight with my sun helmet, they began to cheer as if I were the groom already. The gifts were lying on a big mat, and they made a large mound, Robes, ornaments, drums, paints, and dyes. She gave Ramaleo an inventory of the contents, and he was transmitting it. "I want you to tell her, Ramaleo," I said, "that she's a damned attractive woman, and that she certainly has an impressive trousseau." I'm sure Ramaleo translated this into some conventional African compliment. "However," I added, "I have unfinished business with those frogs. They and I have a rendezvous tomorrow, and I can't give my full consideration to any important matter until I have settled with them once and for all." And so, Metalba, having touched my hands one final time with her tongue, giving me herself and all her goods, after all, it was a fine occasion, I said, "Thank you, and good night. Good night, all." When Ramaleo went to sleep, I lay with eyes open, bathed in high feeling. And this was still with me at daybreak when I got up. It was a fiery dawn which made the interior of our hut as dark as a root cellar. I took a baked yam from the basket and stripped it like a banana for my breakfast. Sitting on the ground, I ate in the cool air, and through the door I could see Ramaleo, wrinkled asleep, lying on his side like an effigy. I approached the making of a bomb with confidence. Although it presented me with no small amount of problems, it would require all the know-how I had, especially the fuse, and the whole question of timing. I'd have to wait until the last possible moment before throwing my device into the water. Now, I had followed with great interest the story in the papers of the bomb scare man in New York. The fellow who had quarreled with the electric company was bent on revenge. Diagrams of his bombs taken from a lock in Grand Central Station had appeared in the news or Mirror, and I was so absorbed in them I missed my subway stop. I thought then that I could make a better bomb, but of course I had the advantage of officers' training in the infantry school, where there had been a certain amount of guerrilla instruction. However, even a factory-made grenade might fail in this cistern, and the whole thing presented a considerable challenge. Sitting on the ground with my materials between my legs and my helmet pushed back, I concentrated on the job before me, breaking open the shells and emptying the powder into the flashlight case. I took out the glass end of the flashlight with a little bulb and fitted it tightly with a circle of wood whittled to shape. Through this I made a hole for the fuse. Now came the tricky part, for the functioning of the apparatus depended on the rate at which the fuse would burn. With this I experimented now, and I did not look at Ramaleo often, but when I did, I saw him shake his head in doubt. I could see I didn't have his confidence, and so I cursed him in my heart and went on with my lighter, setting fire to lengths of various materials to see how they would burn. It turned out that a section of shoelace, held for about 2 minutes in the lighter fluid, served better than any other material. Accordingly, I prepared a section of the lace taken from one of my desert boots and threaded it through the hole prepared in the wood block. Then I said to Ramaleo, "I think she's ready to go." "Yes, sir," he said. "I don't want you to think I'm not capable of doing a good job." He said again, "Yes, sir." I stood clutching the bomb in its aluminum case, ready to carry out the promise I had made to Itello and his 2 aunts. The villagers knew this was a big event and were turning out in numbers, chattering or clapping their hands and singing. "There's Itello," I said. I thought that he too looked apprehensive. "Neither of these guys has any faith in me," I said to myself, and my feelings were stung. "Aye, Prince," I said. He was solemn, and he took my hand and led it to his chest so that I felt the heat of his body. "Well, this is the day," I said, "and this is the hour." I showed the aluminum case with its shoelace fuse to His Highness. I said, "There's one thing I can tell you. I love these people. I have to do something to show my friendship. And I am aware that, coming from the outside, it is up to me to take this on myself." Under the heavy white shell of the pith helmet, the flies were beginning to bite, and so I said, "It's time to start." We set off, myself in the lead holding the bomb. In the dead of the heat, we reached the cistern, and I went forward alone into the weeds on the edge. All the rest remained behind, and not even Ramaleo came up with me. That was all right. In a crisis, a man must be prepared to stand alone, and actually standing alone is the kind of thing I'm good at. There, in their home medium, were the creatures, the pollywogs with the fat heads and skinny tails and the budding little scratchers, and the mature animals with eyes like ripe gooseberries submerged in their slums of ooze. I blew on the wick of my device to free it from dust, or for good luck, and spun the wheel of the lighter, and when it responded with a flame, I lit the fuse, formerly my shoelace. It started to burn, and first the metal tip dropped off. The spark sank pretty steadily towards the case. There was nothing for me to do but clutch the thing and fix my eyes upon it. My legs, bare to the heat, were numb. The burning took quite a space of time, and even when the point of the spark descended through the hole in the wood, I held on because I couldn't risk quenching it. After this, I had to call on intuition, plus luck. And as there now was nothing I especially wanted to see in the external world, I closed my eyes and waited for the spirit to move me. At the last moment, I took a Band-Aid which I had prepared and fastened it over the hole. Then I lobbed the bomb, giving it an underhand toss. It touched the thatch, then turned on itself only once before it fell into the yellow water. The fogs fled from it, and the surface closed again. The ripples traveled outward, and that was all. But then a new motion began. The water swelled at the middle, and I realized that the thing was working. Damned if my soul didn't rise with the water even before it began to spout. Following the same motion, and I cried to myself, "Hallelujah! Henderson, you dumb brute, this time you've done it!" Then the water came shooting upwards. It might not have been Hiroshima, but was enough of a gush for me, and it started raining frogs, bodies upwards. They leaped for the roof with the blast, and globs of mud and stone and pollywogs struck the thatch. I wouldn't have thought a dozen or so shells from the .375 had such a charge in them. I started to yell, "Hey, Otello, Ramaleo, how do you like that?" Boom! You wouldn't believe me! Instead of an answering cry of joy, I heard shrieks from the natives, and looking to see what was the matter, I found that the dead frogs were pouring out of the cistern together with the water. The explosion had blasted out the retaining wall at the front end. The big stone blocks had fallen, and the yellow reservoir was emptying fast. Oh, hell! I grabbed my head, immediately dizzy with the nausea of disaster, seeing the water spill like a regular mill race with the remains of those frogs. "Hurry, hurry!" I started to yell. "Ramaleo, Otello! Oh, Judas Priest, what's happening? Give me a hand. Help, guys, help!" In a matter of minutes, I saw the yellow mud of the bottom and the dead frogs settling there. For them, death was instantaneous by shock, and it was all over. But the natives, the cows heaving under protest, moaning for water, soon everyone was gone except for Otello and Ramaleo. "Oh, God, what's happened?" I said to them. "This is ruination. I have made a disaster." And I pulled up my wet and stained T-shirt and hid my face in it. Through the cloth, I said, "Otello, kill me. All I've got to offer is my life, so take it. Go ahead. I'm waiting." No, you want to die. You got to kill yourself." "I would have laid down my life to help you," I said. "You saw how long I held that bomb. I wish it had gone off in my hands and blown me to smashes. It's the same old story with me. As soon as I come amongst people, I screw something up. I goof." Under cover of the shirt, I gave in to my emotions. I demanded, why, for once, just once, couldn't I get my heart's desire? I have to be doomed always to bungle. And I thought my life pattern stood revealed, and after such a revelation, death might as well ensue. But as Otello would not stab me, I pulled down a cistern-stained shirt and said, "Okay, Prince, if you don't want my blood on your hands." No, he said. Then Ramaleo muttered, "Oh, what we do, sir?" "We will leave, Ramaleo. It's the best contribution I can make to the welfare of my friends. Goodbye, Prince, and tell the Queen goodbye." I hope to learn the wisdom of life from her, but I guess I am just too rash. I am not fit for such companionship. But I love that old woman. I love all you folks. God bless you all. I'd stay, I said, and at least repair your cistern for you. Better you not, sir, said Itello.